The Fast and Furious 11 has faced a major roadblock as a result of an uncompleted script and also the studio's disappointment in the last installment's performance at the box office, considering its ballooned budget. We'll also be talking about the British Prime Minister who has gone on a 2-day trip to India and forging a lucrative deal with Yash Raj Films to shoot 3 movies over a period of 8 years in the UK, which is said to bring in much needed jobs and also bring in some much needed revenue as well. And in our third story, we'll be asking ourselves the question, why is the Black Star Films, the Ghanaian film industry, not producing kid-friendly or family-friendly films for children? These are the stories we'll be delving into on this episode of the Film Mandate. My name is Papa Otu. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome back to the Film Mandate, where I bring to you movie news, reviews, and reactions, both from the African front and the international scene. And thanks for joining me for this very episode. So we'll be covering these stories from Universal's Fast and Furious 11 that has faced a major roadblock now. And then we're moving on to the UK and Indians collaboration between their film industry. And also we'll be analyzing and finding solutions or reasons as to why the Ghanaian film industry is not producing films for children. So into our very first story, Fast and Furious has indeed been one of the major, franchise that we've enjoyed over the years from the year 2001. And we've had our love-hate relationship one way or the other with the franchise. But for the most part, particularly from 1 to maybe somewhere around 7, or depending on the argument as to who you may be discussing it with, maybe even 8, we've had our love affair with these installments. The pinnacle of it all was the 7 that starred Paul Walker, unfortunately, who passed on before even the production would wrap up filming. Well, since the last installment, that is the Fast X, which starred Jason Momoa as the villainous character in the movie, it left on the cliffhanger, and the audiences are eagerly waiting to see what would become of the story that have been left hanging, whetting our appetites to see how it's going to be resolved in the next film. Well, it looks like the franchise itself has encountered a major roadblock with the studio not completely agreeing to the terms of what Vin Diesel has claimed is in place. And as it stands now, it looks like there is not a completed script available to indeed ascertain the budget with which this particular movie would be shot with. Well, in several articles, particularly in the FD, is it 3DVF? The 3DVF article, it has revealed a number of details as to what the deals or as to why the roadblock has happened. Let's take a brief look at a particular, to some portions of the article. So it says that production on the next Fast and Furious has hit a red light, with money and pages both in short supply. The Wall Street Journal details a script that still isn't ready and a budget that exceeds the studio's target by about $50 million. Even as Universal pushes to shave roughly $140 million compared with the last film spend, Jason Momoa says no script has reached him, several cast members remain unsigned, and the release window once floated by Vin Diesel is nowhere on the calendar. with Box Office Mojo charting softer returns across the saga, the road to the finale is suddenly full of speed bumps. So that indeed gives us an overview as to why it looks like the Fast and Furious 11 that audiences are anticipating, despite the poor performance and the films, particularly from episode 9, 10, or even 8 to 10, has become a parody of itself. So, but fans seems very eager in wanting to see how this whole franchise will resolve itself. And it looks like, I mean, rightly so, if you are a studio head, you would be concerned when budgets are ballooning and it doesn't bring the projected or expected returns that you would expect that this investment will yield. So they are seeking to cut down the budget by $140 million, of which the current draft of the script that is said to be in existence right now is projecting a budget of $250 million. But it looks like the studio is not yielding or won't yield to this particular request, seeing that they had a disappointing part. They had a disappointing with regards to the last disappointing performance with regards to the last installment, which is Fast X, which had a budget of $340 million and yet just raked in somewhere around $710 million or $705 million. And the projected returns that could have helped sort of break even and give a reasonable breathing room from losing to the Universal Studio would have been somewhere around $840 million thereabout. So I can understand why they would want to, scale back on the budget and, if possible, get, cut down on the large cast that there are within that has ballooned over the years with this particular franchise. And this Fast X, which is said to be perhaps the finale of the major franchise before a possible consideration of spin-offs and TV series, you have the possibility of having some of the major stars return, just as we even saw for that of Hans. And then also it is expected that Gal Gadot will come reprising a role, and same with Dwayne Johnson as well, returning to reprise the role. Well, on a number of tours that, or a number of public announcements that Vin Diesel has made, it looks like he has gone ahead to state 3 reasons or conditions on which he's ready to work on this project. As to whether it is fair or justified, I'm sure it is only the inner circles of the studio and himself would know and see whether that can be possible. But some of the conditions he has asked for which this film should be made, is first having the movie released on April 2027 date, and then secondly also more or less like a road trip across America, in some major cities, and then last but not the least, the third one to have the character of Paul Walker be sort of resurrected for this last installment. So these are some of the things that he's demanding for. With, I think, the first two, it would have been possible if perhaps even production has already begun on the project for the April 2027 date. But seeing that this project has not even seen a script ready for the project itself to be greenlit with the budget, it looks like a potential 2027 April date may not be possible. And even if it's going to be possible, that would mean putting in more money, which is not really the priority of Universal Studio at the moment. So that would be quite a difficulty as of now. But one of the things I think may be possible is the fact that the road trip, bringing it back to its roots, where the original Fast and Furious films, perhaps from 1 to 3 or 4, was more grounded and had to do more of cars racing amidst other perhaps B plot devices of heist or whatever it may be. That is something they will be willing to consider. But then it would also mean that they would have to plan it out such a way that it wouldn't cost the studio so much more. And in regards to this particular idea, it would mean that there is the very likelihood that any foreign locations outside America would not really be accepted by the studio. So as it stands now, this roadblock is becoming real, and it looks like the 2027 release date may not be possible if they don't find a possible solution to it as soon as necessary. As it stands now, the biggest star for the franchise at the moment, Jason Momoa, has said that he hasn't received any script, and for him, who is going to be a central part of the final installment, if he hasn't received any script, then it is indeed quite worrying. So whatever the case may be, as to whether it may even happen or not, we do not know. But there are rumors or speculations that the studio may not even want to do the last one. But I think because of this franchise being their biggest so far, definitely I'm sure they will be looking at how best they can compromise with the star Vin Diesel, who happens to be the producer and executive producer on this project, to bring it to fruition. So, well, it is of a concern, but I'm sure one way or the other they will find a solution to it so that we can have the final installment in the main IP of this franchise. So let me know what you think. Do you think this is even worth making in the first place, seeing that the stories from the previous one has, gone in a nosedive, even though looking at the box office revenue, which is not actually abysmal, it looks like audiences still love this franchise one way or the other, even though the box office revenue has dipped. Do you think it's even worth it to produce it at all? Or one way or the other, they should produce it, but with caution? Whatever your thoughts may be, can you leave it in the comments section below? So moving on from the US and the Fast and Furious franchise, well, a government and their leader are passionate about bringing much needed, job creation into their country. And this is the story of Prime Minister Keir Starmer from the UK going to India, the biggest film industry in the world in terms of volume of films that are produced annually, to forge a deal which has actually gone through. And in this particular event, they have secured a deal with one of Bollywood's biggest film company and distribution. They are also into distribution. Is the YRF company, which is the Yash Raj Films, and they have decided to go into a 3-movie deal partnership with the UK, where they'll be producing 3 movies over the period of 8 years. And this movie is said to have the possibility of creating 3,000 jobs and also bring in millions of dollars. In general, the British film industry creates about has created about 90,000 jobs annually for people and brings in lots of money. So for just one company to come and potentially create 3,000 jobs over these 3 films, that is indeed a good deal. And indeed, this has whipped up the interest of the UK government to want to pursue this. Even though it's not just his visit to India, it's not just for the film industry, but it shows how high a priority the film industry is to them, seeing that this has the potential of bringing in much needed GDP. So this deal indeed has been struck. And Going to the country of India, they went in with a number of authorities, and they have all expressed their excitement as to this particular deal. I would like us to read a couple of them, starting from the um, let's start from the Prime Minister itself. So the Prime Minister said that Bollywood is back in Britain and it's bringing jobs, investments, and opportunity, all while showcasing the UK as a world-class destination for global filmmaking. This is exactly the kind of partnership our trade deal with India is destined to unlock, driving growth, strengthening cultural ties, and delivering for communities across the country. So that is the Prime Minister's statement. Let's hear what the CEO of Yash Raj Films also said, and he's called Akshay Shaye Vedani. Pardon me if I got it wrong. So he said that the UK holds a very special place in our hearts, and some of our most iconic films, including Diwale Do Dalhania Le Jayenge, DDLJ, were shot in this beautiful and incredible hospitable country. We were honored to host the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer at YRF today to ink this pact, and also had the pleasure to discuss how India and UK could come together to push the content landscape globally through landmark collaborations like this. It is truly special to reignite YRF and UK's filming ties in the 30th anniversary of DDLJ, a film that is synonymous to UK-India's relationship. Our company is currently producing the stage adaptation of DDLJ, the English musical titled Come Fall in Love, in the UK too. So we are thrilled to join hands with UK again and return to filming in the country that has always been extremely kind to us. UK's infrastructure, technology, and talent is unmatched, and we are delighted to deepen our cultural ties with a country that has always empowered us to excel. So, yeah, that is quite exciting that both parties are really happy about this deal. And not only them, there were a couple of other people who were also there. You had the cultural secretary, Lisa Nandi, who also was there. She also made a statement. Let me just pick a line or two from her statement. He said that by making these Bollywood blockbusters in Britain, we will be driving more growth in our world-class creative industries as we committed to in our creative industries sector plan. And I think they are really excited about this, seeing that Bollywood indeed is going to bring in much needed investment for their industry. And that is quite great. That is quite great. And certainly, I'm sure for those who will be aware, they've had a collaboration of that nature that actually went on to win, I think, a couple of awards, in prestigious film festivals, but they also went on to nab some Oscar nominations and I think a win as well. And that is the Slumdog Millionaire, which brought in a total amount of somewhere £300 million or so thereabout. So they have had a working relationship that has worked pretty well for both countries, and they trying to reignite this collaboration is indeed a good thing from them. Somewhere I did read that it looks like YRF, I don't know whether it's YRF or the whole industry of Bollywood itself, sort of went on an 8-year hiatus from shooting in the UK. So it is indeed great that they have sort of brought this unity to bear to see some kind of production going on all over again. Pardon me, aside that, they have quite a number of Indian British population in the UK, and there's been a lot of collaborations amongst them as well. So that is quite good to know. That is quite good to know. Also, we had the heads of the Pinewood Studios. Let me check if I can. Yeah, Pardon me. Yeah. So you had the head of Pinewood Studios also there as well, together with the head of the British Film Institute, present, together with their Indian counterparts, which is the National Film Development Commission. So they were there, sorry, to further support and sign a MOU with regards to that purpose. So indeed, it looks like everything is going well as planned, as they intended. And this indeed is a great step forward for both countries with regards to this particular initiative they have taken. So let me know what you think with regards to this particular initiative between both countries to want to work together by bringing the technology and expertise of the British, film crews together with the storytelling power of the Bollywood industry together. Whatever your thoughts may be, kindly leave it in the comment section below. And moving from the UK and Indian story, we are now going to ask ourselves a very critical question that I'm certain that a number of Ghanaian filmmakers or even a number of Ghanaian citizens who patronize Ghanaian films have asked themselves that how come there aren't much, or even there possibly there isn't even films made for kids in our country. I'm in Ghana, so that's the question I'm also asking myself. And there are a number of factors definitely that is potentially mitigating this from happening or preventing this from happening. On the larger scope already, when you take a look at the industry in general, it looks like even films that the potential those with the purchasing power who could go to the cinemas and watch it without breaking a sweat, or emptying their pockets, it looks like that is even a challenge, let alone a culture where kids have not really developed their cinema going culture. Even among the adults and those with the purchasing power, it is barely, those who attend the cinemas may not even attend it for the reason of watching a local film, heavily as compared to the foreign film. So this indeed is a challenge. And to even think about making films for a society where children don't have the having developed that taste or culture, it is indeed going to be quite a challenge. And this indeed is something that I think the film industry need to pay attention to. And also there is the potential of a great untapped, opportunities within that sector. For those of us who grew up in the 90s, and I'm sure for others who grew up in the 80s, and but particularly in the 90s, we had the opportunity of not necessarily films, because still even back then there weren't films made for kids necessarily, but there were TV shows that had, at the front and center, children as actors and participants of the production itself, which were tailor-made for children to watch and be excited about. Aside the hourly shows of Cartoon Networks, and then Captain Planet and other shows from other countries. But then whenever ours showed up on TV, we get so excited. So there were shows like I think Happy Little Children, which aired for just one season, if I'm not mistaken. It has to do with kids who attended school. And we also had the By the Fireside, which is a it's a live show. There are times they were live, but most often it's a pre-recorded show where you have kids enacting plays or stories from the folklore of Kweku Anansi. So it was quite interesting back then. Those were content in the space of audiovisual production that we enjoyed at the time. But then when we get to the 2010s, they sought to revive, and particularly by the fireside, for to entertain kids, but one way or the other, I couldn't hold. And then into the 2020s, it looks like there isn't anything of that sort, unless I'm mistaken, because now there are so many TV stations. But the TV station that aired it was the Station for the Nation, that was GTV, and it was quite entertaining to watch. But now it looks like there isn't any content necessarily tailored for kids. I mean, when you also talk about those in the teens or the youth in particular, yes, back then there was this hit TV series, Things We Do for Love, that really reigned supreme. You know, when you talk about a production meant for the youth, you know, to young adults, that was the TV series that dominated the screens and was quite a success. And that, one way or the other, kept, you know, the youth alive when it comes to television production. But ever since then, yes, there's been the XOXO and a couple of other productions, but that golden era where where that golden era where perhaps we are looking forward to, where kids can have entertainment shows that will be tailor made for them. It doesn't seem it has ever really happened, and that indeed is a challenge. And so when you look at the landscape, the film landscape, most films made are tailored to adults, or adults, grown-ups, and not for kids, and that indeed is quite a challenge. There are several entertainment shows for kids that is there, but when it comes to television, like TV series, dramatized TV series, or in particular with reference to this show I'm doing, dramatized films for kids, it seems to be non-existent, unless maybe I'm mistaken, maybe I haven't seen the films yet. But as it stands now, there isn't any film tailor-made for kids, and that is a problem. Let's take a couple of let's take a look at perhaps some of the reasons why this may be the case. I think one of the first reasons may be the fact that the industry as a whole doesn't have a proven commercial return. So for producers to even venture into the area of hiring kids actors, you know, making sure that all the conditions are met, which perhaps may be a little costly than the average film made in Ghana, I'm sure they wouldn't want to even do that at all. So that may be a challenge. So a lack of targeted funding or grants towards this particular genre for kids actually is non-existent in a way, let alone even make the money back, is an issue. We also have, so funding itself is a challenge when it comes to tailoring films for kids. That is a major challenge. And one of the, when it has to do with kids, the niche, creating content for them requires special attention in terms of the storylines, in terms of the whether you want to tell moral, whatever it is in the story, and then building the world itself would require special attention to detail, because it has to appeal to their sensibilities as compared to the adults who exist in the world or space that is different from that of the kids. So that becomes quite challenging, and that could be a major, reason why films are not being made for kids. Also, one of the reasons could be that I don't know whether we are scared to venture into that area altogether, not necessarily because the industry itself doesn't generate enough funding for films. But I think that when you make comparisons to what is happening in the US, this year in particular, Lilo and Stitch, which happened to be an animated movie which has been adapted to live action, it broke the the $1 billion ceiling, made over $1 billion. And I'm not saying that perhaps stories of our own made in similar way could make $1 billion, but I think it has a large potential to bring in audiences if it's marketed well and we find innovative ways of getting the kids to watch the film. Perhaps, if not in the main cinemas, find uh, a place where would be suitable to have them watch wherever they may be. So that is something worth considering, because I remember growing up, because we didn't have original, when we watch when we watch the TV screens, the characters we see on the screen didn't represent us. We saw the Cartoon Networks and they were all of other, races and other people. And then when you watch also um, any film that had kids, which are kids acting, front and center, they always, even though we enjoy it, they still don't represent us. So anytime there is anything made by a Ghanaian on the screen, particularly representing us, it's excited us so much. And I think perhaps same can be said of other countries in Africa. And it is indeed exciting. And there are people. I mean, before I even go to that aspect, there were animated commercials or animated social campaigns that were done, though it is not necessarily for entertainment. It entertained us all the same because they were rare. They were rare commodities on screen. You had the one in the 90s. There was an animated there was an animated production campaign for saying no to drugs. And they had this one liner that made every kid always want to say it and was quite exciting. And you also had an advert by an insurance company that was animated, and it was so exciting. So those things, even though were not audiovisual mediums for entertainment necessarily, still did entertain us because we saw ourselves in them. However, let me say that there are individuals in the country who also are embarking, they are doing their best to, bridge the gap that exists in the system. And that, you have the Francis Brown, and you have the Mills Media. You also have Parables and all others who are into animation. But as we know, animation is quite a capital intensive segment of the film industry, which unfortunately in this part of our world, there isn't even funding for that. Even investors won't even consider giving you the funding to make these productions on such a scale that would entertain kids. So that has been a bane in our industry. Most investors would be comfortable giving you money to do a live action film tailored for adults or tailored for the those with the purchasing power. But for kids, that has never really been the case. And that indeed has been a challenge. As to whether there's going to be a way of resolving this soon or not, that I cannot tell. But at least you have the Francis Brown and others holding the fort one way or the other. And some of their productions, due to the fact that they have to sustain the business going forward, some of these productions, because of where the funding may be coming from, cannot be found on our TV screens except for the platforms of which they were created to be on. So that is some of the challenges that we are faced with when it comes to creating content for children in this country, and that is a challenge. I had the opportunity to go watch the two-part episode of The Guardians, the chosen one, The Guardians, made by Mills Media. And if you take a look at the number of people that came to watch it, you realize that there is a hunger for that content. But unfortunately, there isn't enough infrastructure to support it, enough funding to support it. So it is indeed a major challenge. And One of the major reasons for such a challenge we are facing is the systemic neglect and misallocation of talent. Let me just read this that I sort of Googled. It spoke about that the arts are often seen as a peripheral sector by policymakers and investors who view artists as less entrepreneurial. This perspective diverts talented individuals and financial resources away from the creative industry, leading to a brain drain from the sector. So that is a big challenge in our part of the world, where being an artist is not, until recently, being an artist from the 90s to the early 2000s, even to somewhere early 2010s, it's quite frowned upon. And that attitude has sort of been, it's so ingrained in the system that the arts are not so much revered as it ought to be. So it suffers heavily from this particular reason. And barely would you find lots of kids who want to be actors or even could be actors, because maybe even parents wouldn't even want that to happen. And it's been quite a challenge. There's been a few child actors who have dominated the scenes from time back, from I think Banda, I've forgotten his first name, but you also had Mami Sewa, who has grown in the industry from infancy. But on the larger scope, you don't have a whole horde of actors who are kids who are in the industry. So this is because of, the reason being systemic neglect and misallocation of talent. So it is indeed a big challenge, and I think hopefully the NFA would consider having a platform where these things can be discussed and find a solution to it. Content for kids are important. Otherwise, we are training our kids to have a taste for only foreign films or foreign content which are made for them. And when that happens, they grow up to just love, or most often than not, love foreign films than their local films, which in turn would affect the box office seriously. And I wish and hope that those conversations will be had, particularly in the corridors of power, so that a better solution will be found for this issue and resolved. Can you imagine that a whole generation of kids who would end up being adults soon have a taste for foreign content than local content? Is going to cause our industry to suffer. It's going to cause our industry to suffer, and therefore we need to find a solution for it. Anyway, so from the story of the Fast and Furious 11 facing a roadblock to the India-UK collaboration, coming up with a 3-picture deal, creating 3,000 jobs, and also bringing in lots of money to the UK, to now the reason why Ghanaian films are not being made for kids, or family-friendly films are not being made. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. And also soon, this is where I bring the episode to an end. Thanks for joining me for this episode, and I'll come your way again with another exciting episode of the Film Mandate tomorrow. My name is Papa Otu, and I'll see you soon.